Shavua Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Eruvin. We are up to Perek Zayin Mishnah Vav. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'ilun Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Ranbai ben Eliyahu ben Burchai Israelov, Minuchatam began Eden, Amen. The Mishnah now discusses the details of making a Shitufei Mevoot. Shitufei Mevoot is a procedure similar to Eruvei Chatzerot. It permits carrying between courtyards in the alley into which the courtyards open. Now, most of the laws in the next few Mishnahs apply to both Shitufei Mevoot and Eruvei Chatzerot. The Tana, however, chose to illustrate these laws with an example pertaining to Shituf. A Shituf is made by placing food contributed by the residents of all the courtyards in the alley into one of the courtyards. Since it is burdensome to collect the required food from all the households whose courtyard open to the alley, the Mishnah describes a more convenient solution. Kitzad mishtatefin b'mavoy. What is a practical way to make a shituf for an alley? Maniach et chavit ve'omer arezu lechol bnei hamavoy. One person places a barrel containing his own food in a courtyard. The barrel contains enough food for everyone's contributions. The amount will be defined in Mishnah 8. Now, in order to meet the requirement that each resident must own a share of the shituf, he transfers ownership to them in the manner that we will describe. He declares, let this food belong to all the residents of the alley, umzakelahen, and he may grant ownership of the food to them. Now, the Rav explains, in order to legally transfer ownership of an item, a formal act of transfer, kinyan, is needed. So, for example, the owner may tell the recipient or his agent to lift the item with intent to acquire it. The change in ownership occurs when the recipient or his agent lifts the item, thereby removing it from the original owner's possession. The original owner cannot be an agent for the recipient, since he cannot transfer something from his possession through his own taking. Like the Mishnah will teach us, certain other people are also disqualified from acting as an agent because their hand, so to speak, is considered like the hand of the owner. And the Mishnah continues, Zakeren, like we said, he may grant ownership of the food to them, Alede beno uvito agedolim, even to his adult son or daughter, Valede avdo v'shivchato ivrim, or to his Jewish manservant or maidservant. Now the commentaries explain a Jewish servant is not actually the property of his master, rather he is more like an indentured servant. He has work obligation to his master, but is not completely owned by him. Therefore, the Jewish servant retains legal control over his own possession. So for this reason, he can act as an agent to transfer ownership of an item from his master to someone else, or to his wife. The Mishnah continues, now any one of these can act as an agent for all the residents of the alley to acquire the food on their behalf by lifting the barrel. Now, although the people on this list are members of the original owner's household, they have the ability to acquire items for themselves. Therefore, they can remove the food from his possession and acquire it for the other residents. Anyone may be the agent, not only the people listed here. These are mentioned here to contrast them with those members of the owner's household who are disqualified from serving as agents, like the Mishnah will now state. Aval eno mizakeh, but he may not grant ownership to them, lo alidei beno bito aktanim, to his minor son or daughter, velo alidei abdo v'shivchato kenanim, or to his Canaanite slave or slave woman, b'bnei shiadan kiado, because their hand is like his hand, meaning whatever they acquire belongs to him. The commentators explain in Torah law, such a slave has no property rights of his own. Whatever he acquires belongs to his master. Therefore, he cannot serve as an agent to transfer ownership of his master's possessions. And the Mishnah in Baba Metzia, chapter 1, Mishnah 5, also teaches us a minor child's acquisition also belong to his father. Therefore, they cannot be agents to transfer ownership of the food to the other residents, since they are unable to remove it from his possession. And that is the end of Mishnah Vav. Mishnah Zayin now continues, generally, one can act as an agent for another person only with that person's express consent. But where it's obvious that the other person would want something to be done for him, one can act on behalf of the other person without asking him. Our Mishnah discusses how this law applies to making a Shitufei Mevoot on behalf of others in a case where a courtyard opens into two alleys. Now, the Rav explains, ordinarily, one can make a Shitufei Mevoot on behalf of others without their express consent. Since a Shituf provides the residents with a clear benefit by permitting them to carry between their courtyards and the alley, their consent can be assumed. However, this is only when the courtyards open into a single alley. When a courtyard opens into two alleys, the residents of the courtyard have the option to join in a shituf with either one of the alleys, but not with both. Therefore, we cannot simply assume the residents consent in such a case, since we do not know which alley they want to join. So, the Mishnah begins, Nitamet ha'ochel. In a case where the food used for the shituf of an alley became diminished from the required amount before Shabbat began. Now, this amount, like we said, is specified in Mishnah 8. Now, when the shituf was originally formed, the food was owned by all the residents together. Once Shabbat begins and the shituf has gone into effect, carrying remains permitted for the rest of Shabbat, even if the shituf gets lost or it's eaten, as the Tvat Yisrael says. However, the diminished shituf is not valid for future Shabbatot unless it has been replenished. So the Mishnah says, Mosif zakeh, one may add his own food to replenish this amount and grant ownership of it to the other residents. Then tzarich lodio, and he need not inform them and get their consent, because when the shituf was originally formed, they consented to join with this alley. Now Rashi explains, since they originally consented to join in the shituf with this alley, we can assume that they still want to be joined in this shituf. Nitosfu alehen, however, if more residents were added to the courtyard, meaning new residents moved in, and the shituf food is insufficient for the new residents, Mosif zakeh, one may add his own food to reach the required amount and grant ownership of it to the new residents, v'tzarich lodio, but he needs to inform them and get their consent to join them in the shituf. Since the new residents have not yet revealed which of the two alleys they wish to join, they cannot be added to the shituf without their consent. Like we explained, the Mishnah is discussing a courtyard that opens into two alleys. Since the residents are allowed to carry only into the alley they choose to join with the shituf, and they cannot join with both, we cannot assume that we know which one the new residents wish to join. And therefore, you may add your own food to reach the required amount and grant ownership of it to the new residents, but you have to inform them and get their consent to join them in the shituf. And that is an Abotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Everybody should have a Shavua Tov. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.